What if I told you that a defeat in a dark forest 2,000 years ago reshaped the fate of Rome and forever changed the way empires protect themselves? The invincible Rome, which had conquered lands from scorching deserts to the icy cold of the north, faced its greatest nightmare in the Teutoburg forest. 3 whole legions destroyed, not by a bigger army, but by the betrayal and cunning of a single man, Arminius. Picture the panic in the eyes of the Roman soldiers as they realized they were trapped, the standards falling to the muddy ground as the barbarian screams echoed through the trees. In that moment, Rome didn't just lose men, but something far more valuable: its confidence. But this isn't just a story of defeat. It's the story of how Rome turned this tragedy into one of the most important strategic shifts in its history. What would have happened if Rome hadn't given up on Germania? Would the empire have crumbled much earlier? You're about to find out how the disaster at Teutoburg forced the greatest empire in history to redefine its strategies, secure its borders, and even reassess its ambition to conquer the world. In today's video, we'll relive the horrifying moments of that ambush, explore the pain of an empire in mourning, and understand how Rome built its invisible wall, a strategy that would shape its campaigns for centuries to come. If you're passionate about epic stories and want to dive even deeper into the legacy of the Roman Empire, subscribe to the channel now. Here, you'll find daily videos revealing curiosities, strategies, and mysteries that changed the course of history. And don't forget to hit the like button. It's crucial for helping more people discover and explore these fascinating stories. Together, we'll uncover Rome like you've never seen before. It was a damp, gloomy morning in Germania when the Roman army, led by Publius Quinctilius Varus, advanced along the winding paths of the Teutoburg forest. The dense vegetation closed in around the soldiers like a suffocating green cloak, hiding dangers that lurked with every step. The legionaries, confident in Varus's command and the presence of seemingly loyal Germanic allies, could hardly imagine that this march would end as one of the greatest military tragedies in Roman history. Arminius, a Germanic chieftain who had grown up as an ally of Rome, was preparing a masterstroke plotted with precision and cruelty. Varus's army, stretched out in a disorganized column due to the treacherous terrain, began to face the first difficulties: relentless rain, muddy ground, and a forest that seemed alive, conspiring against them. Arminius, who knew every curve and shortcut of that land, waited patiently for the right moment to strike. He had sworn to bring down Roman power, and on this morning, the betrayal was about to unfold. But how could such an experienced legion be blinded by trust in an ally? When the ambush began, it was as if the forest itself had awoken in fury. Deafening screams echoed through the trees as Germanic warriors emerged from all sides, armed with spears, axes, and an intimate knowledge of the land. The Romans, accustomed to fighting in open formations, were pushed into a disadvantageous position, cornered in a terrain where their military organization was meaningless. The heavy rain and mud turned the battlefield into a nightmare. The soldiers, confused and terrified, couldn't distinguish allies from enemies. As the siege closed in, Varus's leadership began to falter. He faced an impossible decision: to resist amidst the chaos or accept that the fate of the 3 legions was sealed. As his men fell one by one, the Roman standards were captured or destroyed, symbols of an empire that seemed invincible now reduced to relics of a defeat. But even in the tragedy, the soldiers resisted with desperate courage, fighting for every inch of the forest. What was Varus's thinking in his final moments, as history crumbled around him? The few survivors who escaped to tell the tale brought with them accounts of indescribable horrors. The legions vanished, their bodies abandoned to the mercy of beasts and nature. In Rome, the news struck like a blow to the heart of the empire, sparking an epic-scale crisis. But while the Teutoburg forest buried 3 legions, the impact of this defeat began to reverberate far beyond the shadowy trees. How would Augustus, the great emperor, handle this humiliation? And more importantly, how would Rome respond to ensure such a tragedy never happened again? The arrival of the first reports of the defeat in the Teutoburg forest cast a veil of disbelief over Rome. Exhausted and terrified messengers crossed the empire, carrying fragmented accounts that 3 entire legions had been wiped out. At first, many in the Senate refused to believe it. How could the Roman army, the most disciplined and powerful force in the world, suffer such a complete disaster? However, the expression on Augustus's face dispelled any doubt. The emperor, known for his unwavering composure, walked through the halls of his palace shouting, "Varus, give me back my legions." Augustus's words echoed the feeling of an entire nation. The Roman people, used to celebrating victories, now found themselves staring into the abyss of defeat. In the markets and squares, murmurs of fear and discontent spread. Stories of terror about the ambush quickly spread, inflaming the imagination of the people. There was growing fear that the Germanic tribes would cross the Rhine and bring chaos to Roman lands. But while the people clung to uncertainty, political and military leaders faced a crucial question. Was Rome truly invincible? In the Senate, the atmosphere was tense. Some of the more cautious senators called for a thorough analysis of what had happened, while others demanded immediate vengeance. Augustus, however, was torn. He knew that sending more legions to Germania could lead to an even greater disaster, but the idea of abandoning the territory seemed like a blow to Roman pride. The emperor himself had spent years consolidating the image of Rome as an unstoppable force, and now that image was in ruins. How could he lead an empire that was beginning to doubt itself? Among the plebeians, the atmosphere was one of collective mourning. Candles were lit in honor of the dead, and funeral songs echoed through the streets of Rome. It was hard to accept that so many lives had been lost in a distant land, a loss that made no sense to many common citizens. More than a military setback, Teutoburg represented a wound in the Roman psyche. The empire, stretching from east to west, uniting cultures and peoples, now seemed more vulnerable than ever. But while mourning spread, the need for action became inevitable. What would Rome do to erase the stigma of this defeat? The psychological impact of the disaster led to an existential debate about the future of Roman expansion. In the past, every defeat had been followed by a campaign of retaliation, but Teutoburg had planted a seed of doubt even in the most resolute hearts. As the Senate debated how to respond, Augustus's figure became a symbol of an empire in crisis. His actions in the days to come would shape Rome's destiny. But before deciding on retaliation or containment, there was an inescapable truth to face. Rome needed to reassess its border strategy. What radical changes would this defeat bring to the heart of the empire? After the initial shock of the defeat at Teutoburg, Rome faced a harsh reality. The dream of conquering Germania had to be abandoned. Augustus's advisors argued that the Rhine, with its broad and difficult-to-cross banks, should become the new line of defense. The emperor, reluctant to accept any sign of weakness, agreed that the survival of the empire depended on a more defensive strategy. Thus, the concept of the limes emerged, fortified borders designed to protect Roman territories from barbarian incursions. Construction of fortifications along the Rhine began almost immediately. Roads, watchtowers, and military camps were quickly erected, transforming the river into a physical and symbolic barrier against the Germanic threats. Patrols became more frequent, and the legions were reorganized to better cover the territory. For Rome, this shift marked a new era in its military policy. But this fortification wasn't just a reaction to the disaster. It was also a clear warning to the enemies. Still, would this defensive line be enough to contain the constant threat? Within the high military command, discussions were intense. Some believed that Rome should launch a new campaign to avenge Teutoburg, regain its prestige, and reverse the losses. Others, more pragmatic, argued that insisting on Germania was a strategic mistake. The territory offered few valuable resources and was inhabited by fierce tribes who knew the land better than any Roman legion. These debates revealed an empire divided between the glory of the past and the need to adapt to the future. However, strengthening the borders brought unexpected benefits. The constant presence of legions along the Rhine boosted the economic development of the nearby provinces, while the network of roads facilitated trade and communication. Rome wasn't just defending itself, it was adapting, turning its limitations into new opportunities. Still, the shadow of Teutoburg loomed over every decision, and many military leaders questioned whether avoiding expansion would weaken the Roman spirit. Was it possible to protect the empire without expanding it? Augustus's decision to consolidate the borders forever changed the balance of power in Germania. The Germanic tribes, seeing Roman hesitation, became bolder, but the presence of the limes also made larger incursions more difficult. Still, the stories of betrayal and ambushes never left the Roman mind. Amidst these fortifications, one name continued to echo through the halls of power and on the battlefields: Arminius, the man who had defied Rome. Who was this mysterious leader who had united warring tribes and dealt such a devastating blow? At the heart of the Teutoburg disaster was Arminius, a name that echoed both in Germanic chants of victory and in Roman whispers of betrayal. To the Romans, he was a cunning traitor. To the Germanic tribes, a liberating hero. Born into one of the Germanic tribes, Arminius grew up under the shadow of Rome, trained as a military auxiliary, and later granted Roman citizenship. He knew Roman tactics and their vulnerabilities, and it was this familiarity that made him the greatest threat Rome had ever faced in Germania. But what led Arminius to betray the empire that had welcomed him? Many Roman historians attributed his betrayal to an unshakable loyalty to his homeland, but others believe he harbored a personal resentment against Rome. Perhaps it was the arrogance of Roman commanders, who viewed their Germanic allies as inferior, or perhaps Arminius saw the unification of the tribes as an opportunity to become more than a vassal of the empire. Whatever the motivation, his betrayal exposed a crucial weakness in Roman rule: blind trust in foreign allies. After his victory at Teutoburg, Arminius became an almost mythical figure among the Germanic tribes, but his rise came with new challenges. Uniting tribes known for their internal rivalries was nearly impossible, and the influence of Rome still loomed over many of them. Even with his victory, Arminius faced opposition from tribal leaders who feared he would become as authoritarian as the Romans. His death years later, in a conspiracy by members of his own tribe, revealed the difficulties of maintaining lasting unity among the Germanic peoples. For Rome, however, the threat of Arminius did not disappear with his death. He had shown that the empire was not invulnerable and that a determined leader, even with limited resources, could deliver a devastating blow. For years, the Romans continued to remember Arminius in their speeches and debates, now as a symbol of betrayal, now as a warning about the dangers of underestimating local enemies. His story directly influenced how Rome dealt with allies and enemies along its borders. The figure of Arminius became a legend, both for the Romans and the Germanic tribes, but his true nature remained shrouded in mystery. Was he an idealistic hero fighting for the freedom of his land, or an opportunistic leader who exploited rivalries to gain power? As Rome consolidated its borders along the Rhine, the legacy of Arminius continued to challenge the certainties of the empire. And in the shadow of this defeat, one question remained: how would the failure at Teutoburg shape Roman military policy in the centuries to come? After exploring Arminius's betrayal and the devastating impact of the defeat at Teutoburg, imagine what it takes to challenge fate and achieve glory in times of crisis. If you were fascinated by the skill of a leader turning seemingly impossible situations around, don't miss the epic story of Spurius Ligustinus, the most decorated soldier of the Roman Empire. Discover how he faced immense battles and became a legend in military history. Click here and embark on this journey of courage and strategy.